Buenas, bienvenidos a este vídeo de unplandivino.net, por así decir, y seguimos con Clau para terminar el taller de la ira, esta sesión 2 maravillosa. ¿Qué tal por allí?
Gracias, Iván, ya al mediodía de este día, 9 de febrero. Muy agradecida, parece uno saber, entre comillas, estas cuestiones, y sin embargo cada vez que volvemos a mirar algo sigue resonando, ¿no?
Sí, se va reforzando el predeseo. Mira, el perro está ahí con los desencarnados. No quiere. Sí. Bueno, entonces, el 9 de febrero del 2022, por cierto, que sería, ya que a veces hablamos del tiempo atmosférico, pues ya tenemos que dar la fecha, como si fuéramos un
noticiero.
Sí, aunque luego lo pongamos dentro de un día o dos o lo que sea. Pero bueno, entonces, por si alguien escucha, pues eso, Claudia en Argentina, yo aquí en España, no sabemos muy bien lo que estamos haciendo, pero bueno, sí lo sabe Dios, así que le responsabilizamos a Él de todo y nosotros seguimos con lo nuestro, ¿no?
Sí, Él este diseño que hizo, que es muy, muy complicado.
Y muy horrible.
Como que nosotros no lo fuéramos, ¿no? Qué rebuscado esto.
Sí. No sé, sí. Estamos enfadados con Dios, pero bueno, vamos así.
Vamos.
Excellent. Right up there.
Does it mean that you have to get to being responsible for, like, say, you can blame others and saying, oh, why did that happen to me? And all that.
Esta es esa cosa que hacen así como una coletilla. Es como que, vale, dices que puedes culpar a otros y decir...
It's,
I can feel your question. You want to know whether that means you've got to take responsibility for everything that's happened to you. Is that pretty much the question? Yeah. And you don't have to take responsibility for every event that's happened to you. The reason why is that many of the events that happened to you when you were a child, and other people have full responsibility for those events. However, you do need to take full responsibility for the emotions that you have decided to shut down within yourself as a result of those events happening to you.
Esa emoción que has decidido encerrar o apagar dentro de ti, a la vez encerrar y apagar, ¿sí?
Can you see the difference of what I'm saying? So, for example, let's say there was when I was 3, I was abused by I'm a female, let's say, 3 years of age, abused sexually by my father. Right? Let's say that occurred to me. Right? That's what occurred. So let's say that occurred to me. I don't need to take responsibility for the event, because he does. He did the damage, he did the problem, he had the emotional injuries. But what I need to take responsibility for is allowing myself to feel the emotions of what that created in me. So I felt hurt by that. So let yourself feel hurt by that. I felt I felt confused that why wouldn't Dad love me? this is hurting me. So let myself feel that feeling. And the instant you let yourself feel that feeling and talk to God about the feeling, that's when God reaches in and says, right, you've got it now. I can help take that away from you now.
And this was so long.
Yeah. And that's the key thing, is let God reach in. The way that we let God reach in is by allowing ourselves to feel the underlying emotion. So that's what I mean by taking responsibility. I don't mean that you have to take responsibility. There's this common New Age belief that I'm responsible for every event that is perpetrated against me. No, you're not. I'm sorry, but you're not. You're not responsible when you were 3 years of age for your father raping you. You're not. Right? But there are emotions that were created inside of you from that event that you've held on to up until now. And you are responsible in the sense that you need to let yourself begin to feel them. When you do and you pray to God about them, that's when God reaches in. So what God wants is the softening of our heart. We will allow ourselves to feel our emotion. That's all God needs from us. He can do the rest.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ahí le dice gracias, la participante.
Ray, get in front.
I just want to share a little bit more about reflections from Jan from yesterday. And yesterday evening at dinner, I was talking about some of the things that had happened here yesterday. And I got really, really angry about the dynamic that went on between you and Jan. And then I read the list of all of the causes for anger this morning. And then you drew all of the circles up here. And I saw that Jen was exposing that center. And that's what I've been covering all these years with all those layers of that circle. All the way out, I've just been operating all of them. And that I was really mad at her for making me look at that.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
And so I'm still unraveling that. In fact, she's been trying to show me that for 9 months since we've been coming and working with you. And I've had layers and layers and layers of resistance because she was exposing my source of pain. So I just want to say I see that now.
That's it. Whenever we have an emotion of judgment towards another person, there's usually something in this interaction that causes us to want to repel the person. And I'm not saying that it's the same emotion they're having, but often what happens is that there is some kind of sympathetic or resonant emotion going on within us that's being triggered by this interaction. So for many of you, if Jen gets up to here and talks to me, for some of you, you feel like she's stealing the limelight, is the feeling that you have. Well, that's the resonant emotion that gets triggered. For some others of you, there's this feeling of like, why does she want to take all the time? So that's another resonant emotion that you probably have siblings or someone else like that in your life take time away from you or take a person's love away from you is a feeling you've had. And so all of these types of emotions get triggered in us, and the key is whenever we get into judgment, to realise that, hang on a sec, this judgment is just covering over lots and lots of stuff within me. It might not be the thing that you're judging that it's covering over, but there'll be something related to the thing you're judging that it is certainly, or the situation you're judging that is covering over.
O sea, lo que está encubriendo puede que la cosa que te esté tapando todo no sea la misma que estés juzgando, pero habrá algo allí relacionado con lo que estás juzgando o con la situación que está juzgando, está relacionado con lo que es, con aquello que está tapando, ¿no? O sea, esto lo podrías parafrasear, tal como está por ahora. Un momento que lo voy a poner otra vez.
Judging that it's covering over lots and lots of stuff within me. It might not be the thing that you're judging that it's covering over, but there'll be.
O sea, puede ser, sí, que la cosa que te esté tapando las cosas no sea lo mismo que tú estás juzgando.
Something related to the thing you're judging that.
Pero habrá, en eso que estás juzgando, habrá algo relacionado.
It is certainly, or the situation you're judging.
O con algo relacionado con lo que estás juzgando o con la situación que estás juzgando.
It is covering over.
Algo relacionado ahí, que es lo que está encubriendo.
Claro, el juicio es miedo, es una de las capas, digamos, que vimos en esos círculos concéntricos, en la imagen, las figuras, que a lo que hace alusión justamente. Por ahí es un poco más, es una capa más, todavía no es lo que realmente, o sea, lo que estás viendo no es lo que realmente subyace, siento yo.
Sí, que lo que dice es eso, es que las cosas que están pasando y a nosotros nos está sirviendo algo de tapadera, pero no es lo mismo que estamos juzgando en los demás a veces. Pero sí que habrá, pero sí hay algo relacionado en aquello que juzgamos. O sea, algo dentro de aquella cosa que estamos juzgando o aquella situación que estamos juzgando, hay algo en eso que nos remite a lo que tapa, a la emoción tapadera en nosotros, a lo que está encubriendo lo nuestro. Sí, es en ese sentido. Se podría entender bastante, pero por la construcción y por cómo es dialogado, así coloquial, y se quedan así las cosas. Bueno.
I had a big feeling about all that, but okay, so I've been kind of nibbling around the edges on this for the last few times we've been together. And it wasn't until you laid it out very clearly on the documentation yesterday, and when you drew those circles this morning. And I'm 70 now, you know, and I see how many years I've been building those constructs. And it was the clear way that you laid it out. It's like the whole thing just started to unravel.
Exactly.
So I'm really grateful for that. It's been running me for a long time.
Yeah. And the beauty of the truth is it immediately begins to unravel our soul problems. That's the beauty of truth. And so if you can always remember, if you're struggling to unravel what's going on within yourself, it's because you're struggling with truth. So the key thing is to always get back to truth, and that will always have the effect of unraveling you emotionally and getting back to the core emotions.
It was also the clarity of the diagrams that helped tremendously.
That's good. That's good. And then in front of you.
I just feel to support Jen with the story that happened to me when I first met you. I really connected to repentance and truth.
Yeah.
And I was on my front veranda and I owned that I was actually really angry with my daughter
Yeah.
for how difficult she made my life.
Yeah.
And
Which, by the way, she hadn't done.
And almost instantaneously, I connected to what I'd done to create her difficulties.
Yeah.
And she's since given me some really amazing feedback on that.
Yeah, that's great.
And within 2 minutes, this whole process was less than 5 minutes. I got my phone rang, and it was Amber on the other end of the line, and she said, "Mum, I've just had this realisation how difficult I've been, and I'm actually ringing up to see how you are."
Yeah.
And it can happen that quickly. That happened in the space of 5 minutes.
So it was once you began to feel the repentance of what you had created, that then the emotion is freed up in your daughter. And this is how it works with our children, is that when we fully experience the emotion within ourselves, that's when everything frees up on the other end. So, you know, this is where it's always going to get back to. So when a person says to me, "Oh, what can I do to help my son?" or "What can I do to help my daughter?" they're already not understanding one basic principle. And that is, you need to focus on what you have done. You created your son, you created your daughter, emotionally. First thing, you need to take responsibility for that, for the emotions, and feel the creation. Feel it completely. And then things will change.
I was just blown away.
Yeah.
All that happened within about 5 minutes. It was like, wow.
It can happen so rapidly. Yeah. We can go on to that.
I'm a bit confused and overwhelmed at the difference between taking responsibility and not attraction, because conceptually I've convinced myself that I'm not to blame for what's happened. I feel completely, because I believe in the law of attraction. I'm really stuck in it.
You mean to say to blame with what's happened in your own life or in other people's lives? Okay. And with regard to your own life, and this applies to every single person in the audience, and that is that everything that's happened to you had a beginning in you emotionally. Now, because most of the beginnings happen way, way back into your childhood emotions. Everything that you've done since then has been based upon childhood emotions mixed with the personality you have and the decisions you made after those events. Now, obviously, when you're little, like I'm talking, young from just born or before you're born, pre-birth, up until 7 years of age, for example, during that time, what's happening is you're mostly reflecting the unhealed emotions in your parents, and all of the emotional damage you get is their suppression of you doing that. Now, after that time in particular, and it's particularly that time because we start getting more and more self-awareness after that time, and so we start making choices or decisions based upon that emotional damage. And we gradually become more and more self-responsible for those choices or decisions. So the person, for example, who's been abused at the age of 3 years of age sexually is not responsible for the event of the abuse when they were 3 years of age. But if they're now 30 years of age abusing another person, they are responsible for the fact that they're now abusing the other person. Does that make sense? So if that 30-year-old man, for example, who was abused when he was 3, is now abusing another 3-year-old, he is responsible for the decision that he makes there. It's the unhealed emotions that he had from 3 years of age that and added to the decisions he then made that created his condition when he was 30. Now, in terms of emotions, he is fully responsible for every single emotion that is inside himself, and fully responsible for the feeling of those emotions. So he didn't create them necessarily, but he needs to feel them. If he felt them, he wouldn't even abuse the person when he was 30. Does that make sense? He would be feeling his own emotions instead. And he would be fully responsible for feeling his own emotions about what's happening in his own life. So when I say emotional responsibility, what I'm saying is we need to understand that the only person that can release an emotion inside of myself is myself. No one else can do it for me. But as soon as I have the desire and willingness to feel the emotion, I'll be feeling it. And at that moment...
Aquí dice el deseo y la disposición a sentir esa emoción. No es literalmente lo que solemos poner como voluntad.
God's love can enter us and assist the... to feel the emotion, I'll be feeling it. And at that moment, God's love can enter us and assist the entire process. But if I'm closed down emotionally, I can't be assisted. You remember in the discussion with the slave spirits yesterday, this is something that came up. They had been abused and tortured most of their life on earth. And they were in the hells of the first sphere when they passed in the spirit world. And their feelings were, why am I here? This isn't fair. I was the one hurt. Right? That was their feeling. But what they hadn't realised was that all they needed to do to get from that place to a new place was to just feel the grief of the hurt.
La pena de su daño. No dice dolor, sino más lo que ponemos como daño o herida.
That's all they needed to do, nothing else. And their refusal to feel the grief of the hurt is what caused them to be locked up in that place. So all God was waiting for them to do was for them to just open their heart to feel what actually happened. They just needed to allow that to occur, and then God could assist the rest of the process. But because of their refusal to do that, they hardened their heart. They then focused all this anger and rage as a result of hardening their heart on the people who harmed them, and that caused their condition to not be able to grow, to they remain stagnant. And it's the same with us. You know, those slaves were not responsible for the events that of the master abusing them. The master is fully responsible for that, right? He was fully responsible for their abuse. What they were responsible for was to feel their emotion. That's all. And if they allowed themselves to feel that emotion, they would not have even attracted the abuse. Or if they had attracted the abuse, they would not be angry about it, right? They would just be feeling their emotions. And when they arrived in the spirit world, they would have arrived in the place where they imagined themselves to arrive. And this the same thing applies to us today. All we need to do is just feel and choose to feel our causal emotion. That's all we need to do. That's what we're responsible for. This is self-responsibility. That doesn't mean I'm responsible for all the bad things that happened to me during my childhood. What it means is I need to be responsible for the emotion that's in me that I'm locking up about those events. And the instant I free that is the instant God can work with me. And the reason why it feels for some of us like God isn't working with us is because we're not allowing that. To occur. Does that make sense to you? We're just not allowing that process to occur.
Okay, it was a question about expressing anger or expressing emotions. Yesterday when Ian was showing us his anger kit, he was wringing the towel as such, and I thought he was wringing someone's neck.
Which is what
Yes, and but previously you said about even if you think of harming someone, you're causing yourself emotional damage or soul damage.
Well, actually, what I was saying is that if you're thinking of harming someone, there is already the damage in your soul that would create a murder. Do you understand that? So, for example, if I'm thinking of harming you, whether I'm harming you or not, there's an emotion in me that's strong enough to create a murder. So my soul condition is judged by how I'm feeling, not by what I've done. You understand that? Okay, so if we take that one step further, and I'll just move this around. If we take that one step further and draw a little diagram, as I'm about to do. The first point, and I've said this before, and I'm just going to get rid of some of these things so that I can do that.
Esta cosa de logística y eso.
Now, which one am I? I don't really know which one. It's that one. Yeah. Now, the first thing is that if I deny I have any emotion at all of anger or rage within me, when I do have anger and rage in me, then at that point I am projecting the most to my outside environment. And you can experiment this with your children if you want to. The instant you deny your emotion with any of your children, they will express your emotion to its full intensity. Right? The reason why is because when I'm in full denial of an emotion, I am projecting that emotion to the world at large at its fullest intensity. Let's say I go through the second step, and that is I come to have an intellectual realization that I have a certain emotion. At that point, I am now projecting the emotion at a lesser intensity than I was when I was in full denial. I'm still projecting the emotion because the emotion is still within me. It's still something that's within me. So I'm still projecting the emotion, but it's at a lesser intensity than it was when I was in full denial. If I openly verbalize the emotion, I'm now even expressing it in a lesser intensity than it was before. So there's now a less strong emotion coming from me. So I can be saying, so here I might be saying, let's say I have an emotion that I want to kill my father for what he did to me. And I'm in total denial of it. That's when I'm projecting that emotion at its full intensity. Let's say I have a fleeting inspiration. Oh, I want to kill my father. An intellectual realization. At that moment, I'm now producing less feelings going out of me that I want to kill my father. If I actually say, you know what, I really want to kill my father, I'm now actually producing less of projection out to the universe again. But then I need to start going through the next level of things, and that is the soul-based realizations. These are all, remember, soul is always feeling-based realizations. Because when I have a realization that I want to kill my father at a feeling level, I am going to be gutted by it. Can you see that? Like, I'm just going, wow, I never knew, you know, you have some really strong emotional feelings about, and sometimes you may even have feelings of shame or guilt associated with these feelings of, wow, you know, how bad is this, you know? I mean, that kind of feeling you have of, I never saw this in me before, and now I'm seeing it, you know. now I'm actually projecting less again. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, once I start feeling the rage, so once I have a soul feeling of what's in there, so let's say
nos meten anuncios y como va un poco lento, vamos a... No quieren que veamos a Jesús tanto, nos quieren que nos hagamos de nueva era, que son anuncios que están saliendo ahí. Me salen muchos de nueva era cuando... Bueno, un sentimiento álmico o del alma. Un darse cuenta a nivel del sentimiento álmico, esa comprensión a nivel del sentimiento álmico, es la cuarta, y ahora vamos a ver.
I'm now projecting it even less again while I'm feeling it. Now, I'm not saying dumping it on them, I'm saying feeling it like Ian was demonstrating yesterday. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm now feeling it even less again. When I say I'm feeling it, if you're doing it, you're this angry rage, I'm feeling less from you. Because there's less coming projected at the universe around you when you're owning more of it. Now, there's many more levels I've got to go through here. If it's rage, then I've got to have a feeling about what the rage is about. And then I'll have to have a feeling about that underlying causal emotion. And when I get down to right to the core of it, now there's nothing coming out of me and nothing that can damage anyone around me. So can you see that each step is like a step of opening? It's like you can think of it like your soul, like a flower opening, right? Each step is like you opening, and you're owning more of it. So therefore, less of it is going out to the universe. And each change you make in this step is going to greatly aid everything going on around you. So, if you want to wring someone's neck and you actually physically do the sensation of wringing their neck, in that particular, but not actually physically wringing their neck, but, with a towel, wringing the neck of the towel, I want to wring their neck, you're actually in a state of feeling, the soul feeling its rage. That is far better than you doing anything above that. It's not better than you doing anything below that, because there's more you need to do. Does that make sense? You need to get to the point that's deeper and deeper and deeper. But how do you get to that point if you don't allow yourself to go through it? And this is one of the things that a lot of the New Age teachings and a lot of the moral teachings of the natural love path teach you to detune from this process of thinking through it. And they teach you to try and do it all in an intellectual level, which actually doesn't reduce the emotion coming from the person. So quite often I meet people that say they've been doing, you know, New Age type things, or they've been spiritual people for 30 years, and I'm feeling this intense rage coming from them. You know, there was someone I met recently who does grief therapy, and there's this intense anger with his father, like, that is coming from him. You know, like, I don't know how people around him respond to their grief when he's got this intense rage.
Aquí dice,
I don't know how people around him respond to their grief when.
Aquí lo que habla, aquí no habla de la rabia en el primero. Dice la grief, esta, la pena de siempre, que habla. Y creo que se refiere a simplemente eso. No sé cómo la gente que lo rodea responde en el sentido o conecta con su pena interior, claro. Cuando, sin embargo, el terapeuta supuesto tiene esa intensa rabia hacia los hombres. Sí, aquí eso también. Ahí dice grief y no rage.
He's got this intense rage going towards men, you know. But he is totally unaware of it. Totally unaware that the emotion even exists within himself. Doesn't want to even acknowledge it. So he's in this place, and that's when everyone around him's getting the full burst of it. If he was in this place, at least they'd be getting less of it. But the problem is there's so much judgment about this place, the soul feeling and a rageful emotion. There's so much judgment, there's so much hurt about feeling the emotion, there's so much feelings in people about that it's bad, it's wrong, it's sinful, and yet it's the way, or the gateway into, or the guide, if you like, into the deeper parts. Now, what I'm suggesting is we need to get into the deeper parts. You can't just stop there. So don't stop in your anger. You need to get below your anger. But you're not going to get below your anger while you're denying your anger. Just like you're not going to get, you're not going to get to the soul realization while you're wanting to not talk about it. You're not going to get to the talking about it while you're intellectually denying it. Do you know what I mean? So allow yourself to sink through these places and allow yourself to become aware. Talk freely about those things. And right at the back, thanks.
Okay. Just a question. Talking about owning things and taking ownership on board of your own feelings. What about, how do you stop yourself from taking on board other people's actions and other people's, like with my father? I look at his actions and how he responds to people, and I just think, oh my God, that, you just, did this or this, your whole life would be a lot better. And that, I suppose I take on board that, and I think I want to fix it, but I can't fix him, no. But it causes a lot of rifts between.
There's an emotional reason in you as to why you want to take on their life. The key is to allow yourself to start to feel the reason for that. Now, usually the reasons are twofold, and there are two branches to it. There's usually a thing in them that you're saying that you don't want to see anymore. Like something in them that you're saying that you don't want to see anymore. which means there's an emotion in you of judgment about what you're seeing that you want to stop in them. The second thing is that obviously there's a law of attraction involved, so there's an emotion being triggered in yourself that you're wanting to stay away from. So often what we do is we focus our life on helping others in order to avoid emotions within ourselves. So when, and this was a major problem that I had in the past, where I spent a lot of time helping others, and yet I was locked up with lots and lots of emotions. And it's a major problem with, in fact, why a lot of people enter the medical profession or any of the helping professions, social working profession and so forth, is that often their emotions locked up in themselves that they want to assist others to release, because they don't. It's a way of avoiding the emotion within themselves.
that I'm avoiding, because I just feel that I just want to make it good for him, because this is how, because I feel.
Why?
Why?
Yep.
Because I know what it's like to have those nice relationships, and I'd like.
Aquí el por qué se lo pregunta aquí, pues es que por comodidad en la transcripción nos viene más tarde. Solo quiero que sea bueno para él, y le interrumpe ahí. ¿Por qué? Why? Que es como se dice. Pues porque sé lo que significa, lo que es tener esas buenas relaciones que tengo. Me gustaría que él experimente eso, ¿no? Que sea feliz. Lo está diciendo. ¿Por qué? Le pregunta. Él no quiere.
Like him to experience that.
Why? He doesn't want it.
No.
So why do you want him to? See?
Because he's affecting other people as well.
Well, there's that. There's one. But also you're feeling responsible for him. So why is that? Yeah. There's childhood emotion there. Why do you feel responsible for him? You've become the parent of your parent. And you know that, like, this is how you're acting as a parent towards your own parent. So from childhood, your parents made you responsible for their emotion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, probably right.
Yeah. So you now believe you are responsible for their emotion. And one of the reasons why you are responsible is because that's the only time you get loved. See, this is the thing you get back. The thing you get back is if he does do the changing, you can feel part of the change will be he loves you more.
Yeah, probably right there, actually.
Yeah. So what's happening is, by you trying to fix his life, what you're really trying to do is get him to love you more. But he doesn't love you more because right from your childhood, he's been making you responsible for his emotion. And so you now, as an adult, take full responsibility for his emotion. And in reality, that's an emotion inside of you that you need to heal. The truth is that you're not responsible for his emotions at all. But the reason why you feel you are is because if you don't take responsibility for his emotions, he will not love you in return. And that's the truth. He hasn't loved you. And he's not capable of loving you until he takes responsibility for his own emotions.
But I don't think he ever will.
And that's why you do it. Because if he never does, then you want to get him to do it so that you can feel more love. Does that make sense?
It does, but I suppose I just want him to experience what I've experienced with other relationships. I suppose.
Well, you want him to change for your own benefit. Actually.
But I don't depend on him for my happiness. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't, because I've got a wonderful life, but that's one thing that...
I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with you. There is a factor of your life where you are dependent upon him for your happiness, because there's a really core emotion in there that Daddy doesn't love me, Daddy can't love me, I need to fix Daddy so Daddy can love me. And that's a very, very basic childhood emotion, and you need to allow yourself to just experiment with that a bit. I know that.
Ahí le añade infantil muy básico, o sea, una muy básica infantil.
But experiencing not feeling enough, is that what you're saying? Or...
Yeah, stop helping him and see how you feel. See, at the moment, the addiction that you have is to help him. If you help him, you feel good about yourself.
Or is there mad at him? Because I go, what do you do that for? Why can't you say this for?
Yes, so stop getting mad at him. And stop helping him. And then notice how you feel. You'll feel guilt, guaranteed. And then drop down under the guilt and allow yourself to feel the emotions that you feel underneath that. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Just a general comment for everyone. You take away your addiction, you will definitely at some point feel the emotion. Now, you know how cigarette smoking is an addiction? If you take away the addiction of cigarette smoking, in other words, you stop cigarette smoking, what will happen is you'll feel the reasons why you started it in the first place. Now, a lot of people in that situation take up eating lollies or eating chocolate because that satisfies that addiction, right? This is why sometimes, or eating food, because this is why sometimes people who give up the addiction of cigarette smoking start getting larger when they were nice and slim all their life, because they're just swapping one addiction to the other. If you actually get rid of the addiction and feel your emotion, and I'm talking now not just about physical addictions like cigarette smoking, but actual emotional addictions, things that you're emotionally addicted to, if you give that up and just allow yourself to feel your emotion, you will rapidly get into some causal emotion. It would be a very, very good way to access causal emotion.
Hey Joe, is that why some people give up smoking and then they say, look, I never had a cold for 20 years and now I'm sick all the time?
Yep, and colds and flus affect the chest area, obviously, and usually the chest area is a deep cause of really broken love feeling inside of the person. One reason why people who smoke get lung cancers is a heavy suppression of chest-based, or if you think about heart chakra-based emotions, which are all based around love, the giving of love and the receiving of love. So yes, a person who gives up smoking will often get colds after that because the emotion of being unloved is starting to get triggered in them. But they're still trying to deny it. Before they could deny it with the smoke, now they can't deny it, so now there's a physical symptom. And that will continue to occur until they start allowing the grief to occur. And so there's a lot of tie-up between physical addictions and emotional addictions, and then the underlying emotion that we're trying to wrap in cotton wool and avoid. And just over I know it'll be like the dawning of the day.
Aquí deben haber tenido algún problema y han cortado el vídeo.
All right.
Habrá habido un largo rato hasta que se han decidido a salir o ha habido problema de micrófono, no sabemos.
So say your name for everyone's benefit.
I'm Mary Ann.
Mary Ann. Mary Ellen.
Aquí se llama Mary Helen, pero no lo ponen aquí, parece.
I started feeling like I was experiencing emotions at the end of last year after Cornelius.
Yeah, you really connected some emotions then, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yep.
And it seemed to be improving a lot. And then I started feeling like I was piggybacking other people's emotions and I should be feeling my own.
Right.
And I did get a little bit of success there, but not anywhere near the depth of feelings I got.
It's all right. It just needs to be higher.
Okay.
That's it. We want to hear you.
I started experiencing some emotions after Cornelius's talk last
Vuelvo a repetir todo.
year, and I thought I was doing quite well with it over about 5 or 6 weeks. But then thought that I was just piggybacking off other people's problems or emotions, and that I should be feeling mine. And I started accessing not nearly as well, but doing some. And then...
Can I just address that first? When we feel emotions that other people are feeling but can't feel our own, there's some really core belief systems that are going on within us, some core fears. Many of you will find that when somebody comes up here and starts expressing their emotion, you can connect with your emotion. But when you go home, you don't seem to be able to connect to it anymore. Notice that? And if you're noticing that, and that's a common issue that a lot of people have, if you're noticing that occurring, then it's because there's a feeling you have towards yourself that you don't have towards that other person who you're connecting with. So, for example, many of you, when Cornelius started describing some of the emotions that he was having about, anger and this terrible shame that he was feeling about himself and his actions in the first century, many of you really connected with that, didn't you? So many of you had this grief come up, and many of you in the audience at the time, or watching the DVDs may have felt that grief. What's happening there is you view Cornelius as more important than yourself. That emotion is actually inside of you, but you're not letting you feel it. And you can only feel it if somebody else is feeling it. Which means that you do not value yourself enough to feel it. Does that make sense to everyone? So that's the first issue that you're facing. One of the major primary emotions that you face is that I'm not allowed to feel my own emotion unless someone else is in agreement with my emotion. And can you see how that relates to your childhood as well?
Or just not allowed.
Right.
Or just not allowed to feel my emotion.
Not allowed to feel your emotion,
Yeah.
which is definitely a childhood relation. There is a childhood relation. between how your mum and dad viewed their own emotion, and that's what caused you to suppress your own emotion.
Una relación de la infancia con respecto a cómo tu madre y padre ven su propia emoción, claro. Eso es lo que causa la supresión.
They taught you everything you know. Yeah, exactly. Now, so does that understand that? So the first phase of what you're dealing with now, so the reason why you were feeling your emotions for 6 weeks or so is because you were doing, as you were saying, piggybacking your emotions on top of others. So them experiencing an emotion meant that you could experience your emotion. Because they gave you validation to experience your emotion.
And they were the centre of attention.
Exactly. Exactly. Now what you're trying to do is swap it over so that you can be the centre of attention of dealing with your emotion. And because of that, in the other emotion, which is this emotion that I'm not worth anything, you're not allowing yourself to feel the emotion. Does that make sense? So that's the blockage. So the key is now to talk to God about how much you feel you are personally worth, and how much you feel whether your emotions are worth anything, and why and start investigating why you value other people's emotions more than your own. Does that make sense? Let yourself start investigating that emotionally. So pray about that. Start allowing yourself to feel why it's so easy for you to connect to something if someone else is connecting, while you've got that validation. And you'll find there are a list of fears in there. So if you do some kind of a fear list of fears you have about your own emotion, you find that you access some things there. Now, can you continue with what?
So I seem to be having some sort of success accessing my emotions.
Good.
Esté bien, lo dice Jesús.
And I go to the spiritualist church.
Yes.
And but the next Sunday after that started, the clairvoyant on platform came to me and said that the church was filled with spirits and they were all excited about the work I was doing, and that basically good things would happen and the church would get bigger and all that sort of stuff. And then before the next Sunday, I'd actually broken my leg. And that meant I didn't cope at home, and I went and stayed with my mother for a couple of months. And wasn't able to get into it very much there at all, although I tried. I watched the DVDs a lot. And when I got back home and thought I'd be able to just go back to where I left off when I was at home, I just seemed to have been really
shut down.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was interesting law of attraction for you. The breaking of your leg meant you had to stay with your mother. And it's your mother that shut down your emotions. And so while you were with your mother, did you find yourself closing down truth with her? Did you find yourself not being able to express the truth to her?
Well, I found that's what I normally do, just shut down and just let him go.
Yeah.
But this time I sort of either stop her or interrupt her and say what I thought was happening.
Good.
And
how did you find that? It was pretty pointless, wasn't it?
well, it's actually very volatile.
Exactly.
Yeah, but she's more locked down than me. So.
Exactly.
She's very good, I suppose, but she tends to get angry and stay very calm sounding.
So she's very angry, calm anger. Like many parents do this, like real calm anger. Like I'm calm, but I'd like to kick you. That kind of anger.
Yeah, or impose her opinion of it upon me.
Exactly.
In a very calm way, and then I'll react by getting angry and yelling.
Yeah, I'll just keep this up.
Okay. So there was a lot of, she actually started getting a little more loud when I kept insisting on interrupting what she was saying.
Awesome.
I thought so, actually.
Yeah, very awesome.
Yeah.
But what actually happened inside of you was this. You came away feeling that it was pointless addressing any issue with your mother. That's the feeling that you had. And because your mother didn't validate your feelings, you now also feel that it's pointless addressing your own emotion. Does that make sense? So that's the feeling that you had, that you came away from your mother with, this feeling that, well, mum's never going to agree that, you know, that these things I'm saying are true. So mum's never going to agree with it. What's the point? And, you know, are they even true? Do you know what I mean?
I think it was more like it was, well, how can something that, yes, you probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
But that I wanted her to be able to.
Yes, definitely.
And
what's the feeling that you wanted her to be able to address these issues? You tried addressing it with her. She just gets angry. The whole thing looks pointless. How did you then feel?
Well, that her whole life's been like that, and that she's not going to listen to me telling her what I think she should do.
So your feeling is I'm not being listened to by my mother. My mother doesn't care about what I'm feeling or going through. Can you see there's quite a lot of emotions that are there, but that you've come away feeling pointless about accessing yourself, I mean?
Yes, I guess, and it's partly because I feel that she's so locked down, she's not going to be able to.
But can you see what you're saying in this? You're actually saying that you're not able to feel your feelings because she's so locked down. That's really what you're saying. And this is a childhood belief, actually, that you have.
And I guess it's also that she's more important than that I probably try and help her have the realizations I have before I can continue on.
That's right. So what's happening with your suppression of your emotion at the moment is you've got this layer of it. If mum doesn't want to do it, or if mum doesn't agree with it, then there's no point in me doing it unless I've got her doing it too, sort of thing. But there's also this feeling, and I'm just feeling, sometimes I have trouble actually stating the feeling in words. who's better at this than I am. But I'm feeling a feeling from you with regard to your mum, but I'm having a difficulty actually describing it. It's this feeling that it's a very childlike feeling that unless she agrees and approves, that it's not valid.
I suppose she's sort of interfered in my life all life.
Yeah, I can imagine so.
And
Esto lo dice también Jesús.
usually I do things and could do them because I didn't tell my parents, and therefore they didn't spend the next 6 months.
Trying to get you to tell them not to do it. Yeah.
Basically. Or finding out I died and telling me I should have done it in one of 500 different ways.
But not the way you did it.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but I suppose having the head-to-heads with her there, when I was there, it sort of made me feel like I had more of a backbone.
Yes, and this is why it was very good for you. It was good for you in one sense because you stood up for yourself with your mother for the first time in your life, right? However, the part that wasn't so good is you came away with the feeling of this childhood feeling that you were not letting yourself get into, and that is this childhood feeling that unless mum approves of me doing it, then it's not valid. It's not real. It doesn't really make any sense unless she approves.
So that's underlying the feeling that I actually did quite well to, I sort of feel more like I'm my person. But obviously that's other feelings underneath it.
Yeah, what you're avoiding emotionally is this deep grief that for the majority of your life.
Esta pena profunda.
You've actually unknowingly done exactly what your parents want you to do, even though you've tried to do exactly the opposite. There's been this underlying emotion there driving that most of the decisions, looking for their approval and never having it. So there's this deep grief that mum's never going to approve of me. That you came away from after spending 2 months with her, but not allowing yourself to feel. Does that make sense? So allow yourself just to drop into that feeling now. At the moment, it was good that you stood up to her because that means you're starting to have some self-worth, some self-love. But what needs to happen now is allow yourself to feel the grief that mum is never going to approve of you. There's something, I'm trying to get it because the way I'm saying it's not quite right. There's this feeling that you have that mum, you are, as far as your mum is concerned, you're unlovable in her eyes. There is something intrinsically wrong with you that mum will never be able to love.
I suppose that's just, I'm not good enough.
Well, that's what drives the emotion of being not good enough, yeah.
It was a hat put on each of us as children. I was the one who needed help. And my brother was great and my sister.
Yeah, you were made. You were made to feel like no matter what you did, it was not going to be enough.
Because even if they did manage to do what they wanted or said they wanted, they would still judge it negatively.
Yeah, and that it wasn't done the right way, or it wasn't, yeah, exactly. And while you're saying all of these things, I can feel you actually disconnecting from the emotion of it. Right? So what's actually happening right now is that you are trying to keep, like, while you're saying the words, you're having sort of you're at the stage of intellectual realisation of what it's about, but still not letting yourself actually dive into the pool of the emotion of it. And that's the thing to pray about. Ask God about helping you through this fear of getting out of the knowing what it's about and into the feeling what it's about.
It's okay, it's been helpful.
No worries.
There's another part to it. I think part of the having broken my leg, of course I've been an insulin dependent diabetic for 35 years. And
When did you first get diabetes?
I was 20 diagnosed, yeah.
Yes.
And
vale. Que aquí de repente no parecía que se despedían, pero no. Esto ya lo ha dicho, hay otra parte que forma parte del hecho de haberme roto la pierna porque he sido diabética, independiente durante 35 años de la insulina. Vale, ¿cuándo tuviste por primera vez?
at the moment it's just all over the place. I've been having hyper. And people that call ambulance and stuff like that. And it's just, I suppose, just before I broke my leg, I was glad it happened to be because it meant that the conditions seem to be improving, but now it's more or less pretty much unmanageable more than anything else.
Yep.
And I'm assuming it's partly to do with everything else that's been going on.
There's probably two primary things to look at with your diabetes. The first one is that you have an emotion within you that began when you were around 20 years of age. And it caused the shutting down. It's a fear-based emotion. It caused the shutting down of the pancreas in terms of what's happening inside of your body. If you look at some of the events surrounding when you were 20, it may help you actually identify the emotion of that you're afraid of. Unfortunately, what happened at that time, because of that fear, a spirit who was also in a similar state to you became attached to you. So my suggestion is maybe to go to a person who can do a spirit removal, or even pray to God for the removal of this spirit. But it's going to have to be a longing in your soul to remove it and then to deal with the underlying emotion inside of you that created the attachment. Allow yourself to feel what that's about. And then talk to the spirit who is actually attached to you and is using your body in the same way that you're using it, in order to pump you full of adrenaline, in order to stay away from the emotion of fear and terror that you have. So let yourself connect to that emotion, and then also talk to the spirit who's with you, and hopefully the spirit will disconnect you. If not, it's easy enough to remove that spirit at some point. Does that make sense?
Yes.
When the diabetes becomes unmanageable, it's because two of you are both interacting with the pancreas and into that area of your body, into the third chakra area of your body, and that's what's causing that part of your body to become unmanageable for one soul. So it's good for you to work through the emotion, but also to remove the attachment. I've met quite a few ladies who have had spirit attachments with regard to diseases like diabetes, and usually they're resulting around some fear-based or terror-based event that occurred, but they didn't release the emotion on fully.
Aquí, como se ve por el contexto, apegos de espíritus, de personas desencarnadas, para que no nos perdamos. Resultado de algún evento basado en miedo también ocurrió. Muy bien.
Disaster based. Yeah. You can relate to that. Yeah. Good night. Sorry, let me just say thing. Yeah. Permission and approval, but there's quite a number of different emotions in there about mum, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Josh?
Aquí ha dicho Josh, es el chico este que lo vimos.
You want to come on the chair or you want a question?
My question came up when Jen was up before.
Yep.
Because when she was feeling through getting to where she was, I saw her blog. I saw where she was stuck, and it reminded me of where I was yesterday and where I've been most of the time.
Yep.
Most of the time stuck on this thing. And it's sort of the question of now it's washed past my mind now. All this stuff between that whole discussion and I've just been in, I feel like I've hyperventilated my state of being into this alternative state of, like I've got all these tingles through my whole body. It's been lasting the last half hour. And I just have this feeling that there's a bunch of spirits around me that are hanging around, waiting for me to ask this question. I feel that there's this lighter spirits there as well. The question is like, why is it so hard to volunteer in that moment when there's this block, when there's this, you're totally stuck, and it feels like I feel, okay, I felt grief before, and everyone here has grief. Everyone wants to get to their grief. That desire to get to the grief, and then in the moment, like if we take that to God and go, okay, God, help me with this one. Come on, I want to get to the grief now because I'm sick of talking about it. Why is it so? I can't articulate. My mind's washed.
Why is it so hard to actually feel the grief when you feel you want to feel it?
Yeah, I feel I want to, because I felt grief before and I know what it feels like, and the actual feeling of the grief doesn't feel bad, it feels great. I feel like I actually enjoy feeling grief.
Yeah.
And I know I've got grief. Yeah. Why is there this big issue with getting to the grief right now?
Right, yeah, that's a good question. With every single emotion, so while grief is the healing emotion on the majority of occasions, the type of grief will be linked to events which are linked to different belief systems. And usually, the problem is usually that it's not so much the grief that we're afraid of experiencing, but this particular type of grief, or what it's actually connected with. So to give you an example, let's say you may have no trouble at all crying about how someone else has been hurt. But you may have terrible trouble crying about how you've been hurt. In both cases, you might cry the same amount even, so you're not scared about crying. It's what you're crying about that you're afraid of accessing.
O sea, aquello de lo que tienes miedo de acceder es el tema de por qué es lo que vas a llorar. O sea, no es el miedo a llorar en sí, sino el por qué, cuál es la cosa.
So the majority of times what's happening inside of us is that we are dealing with different groups of emotions, some of which we are more afraid of than others. And it's the ones that we are more afraid of that we have more locked up grief about generally.
Las que tenemos, aquellas en las que hay más pena bloqueada son respecto a las que más tememos. Allá lo que más tememos son aquellas que tienen más pena bloqueada. Otra manera de decirlo, un poquito menos, pero que esto lo quitaré también. Las que tenemos más pena bloqueada en general.
And that particular facet feels worse to us at that moment.
La sentimos peor a nosotros, nos parece peor, la sentimos peor.
And that's why we can't access the grief even though we've cried before. So, for example, I've cried many, many times about all sorts of issues, but there's one issue, which is an issue about God that I've currently got, that I'm working my way through, that I'm still having trouble accessing the grief of. Because for me, it feels like the grief is so big that it's just going to be like I'm going to die feeling this grief. Now, I have felt that way with all of the other griefs I've felt too, and I didn't die. That's not helping me get to the bottom of this one. And I need to just allow myself to keep reminding myself, I've got this issue with God, it's about grief, pray about it, keep praying about it, and eventually the desire will be greater than the fear. And when the desire is greater than the fear, you will instantly experience it.
Is this hyperventilating experience getting through any block to getting to what I'm trying to get to? Or is that?
It could be, and that's why you just need to trust a lot of what the body is doing. So there are a lot of really good therapies that are available today which connect you to your body and actually allow you to trust what the body is doing. So allow yourself to trust your body. So remember yesterday when you were up here and you started to shake, and if you trust that feeling that's in your body, you'll get to the emotion that shaking was all about, and then you'll get to the grief that was under that emotion.
I feel like there's a lot of fear because, like I said before to you once, that I'm like an extremist.
Yep.
But like Mary, like I need to. Like right now, I've taken on the vegan challenge. I said to Tristan before, I've taken on the vegan challenge. And my fear is, okay, well, that's probably doing something physiologically to me to make me hyperventilated. And that goes along with the whole feeling that this is a cold. And that one of the tactics is to get you hyperventilated. To make you feel like you're in a nice space with spirits around you. And, you know, there's fears there.
The truth is, when you stop eating meat, there will be more spirits who can connect to you, and your spirit connection will be stronger. The problem with that is, if I'm holding on to an emotion, then whatever the attraction is going to be, I'm going to feel those spirits with me and feel them stronger. So yes, there will be a resolve to that. So the key is to understand that everything that happens to you, as you refine yourself and bring yourself more morally into, love, what would be love, what's going to happen is there will be changes in your body, and there will be changes happening to you with regard to spirit connection, and that will certainly have an impact on you and the way you process emotion. And you have quite a lot of fear related to spirits, related to your childhood.
I watched that movie you suggested last night, and it freaked the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to deal with that last. We'll do everything first.
Right. Well, it's hard. Unlikely you'll do that. You probably deal with that next, I would say.
Oh, shit.
and that's probably what this is related to. This deep fear you have about the spirit world, which is what began in you at quite a young age because of some of the things you saw then. So allow yourself just to work your way through that emotionally. When you feel terror, and this applies to everyone, when you feel terror, you will be shaking and you will be feeling terrified. Pray to God. Remember, every single time, pray to God through things. Pray to God through things. Don't neglect that relationship with God, and that will help you through everything. So as long as you connect with God and allow yourself to maintain that connection, you'll get through absolutely everything.
So if I want to deal with whatever my law of attraction is right now, with this whole situation, what's your suggestion? Because I do feel stuck. Like, would I need to leave the building and go deal with some stuff to get into it, or what?
Algunas cosas para entrar en ellas, para entrar a meterme emocionalmente en esas cosas, salir e ir a aliviar.
Well, no, what you're feeling at the moment is you are feeling some fear inside of you, and that's what triggers this. Is this a cult? Is this a thing? Are they mind controlling me? And all that kind of stuff. It's the fear within you that's triggering those thoughts. So just allow yourself now, even bodily, and you can feel yourself starting to shake a little bit, allow yourself to experience the fear. So I've had to do that many times myself to get through that phase.
If the fear's there because there's a causal emotion, and you say that we can volunteer.
But this is actually childhood. Fear, and you will need to experience it.
Okay, so that is in a way in itself a causal thing?
Yeah. You can tell by how you're shaking and how you're twitching and your body's moving around. Usually that's an indication of childhood emotion.
O sea, si puedes distinguir, o sea, si puedes ver, discernir, o sea, distinguir eso que estás.
Being suppressed. Yeah. So allow yourself to experience that childhood emotion without resistance. That's the key here. It's not an adult thing where you're trying to be afraid of something in order to deny something else. This is a childhood feeling of fear or terror that you will experience.
Okay, thanks for that.
No worries. Now it's 25 to 6, so it's actually with time to finish for the moment.
Momento para acabar, ha dicho la hora.
And thank you very much today. I hope today has been a little bit more informative about how you can use your anger to dig down, and also what's underneath. You know, starting to see what's underneath those feelings and emotions you have. I'd like to thank very much everyone's personal comments and participation today. It's been really good. I'd also like to thank you very much for your donations over the last 3 days too, because they've been very helpful to me and Mary as well. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for your time.
Bueno, ¿estás viva? Yo apenas. La pantallota esta.
Sí, Sí, se siente, son 6 horas llevamos.
Sí, yo muchas grabaciones, nos hemos metido una paliza.
Sí, muy interesante respecto a mi historia, siempre uno resuena más con algo, tanto la chica que quería que el padre experimente la armonía hasta que dio toda la vuelta y
es que esas
se vio, ¿no?
La herida inconsciente,
Sí.
que no sabes cómo y actúas así toda la vida, buscando la aprobación como un niño herido, claro, es eso.
Claro, sí, pude percibir claramente, porque bueno, en esto deja de ayudar, deja de hacer lo que estás haciendo, o sea que se corte el circuito de la adicción, cae bajo la culpa, que es lo que no quería hacer yo, porque claro, dejar de ser la buena inmediatamente activa el juicio de la culpa, y asumir, pasar, atravesar todo eso, estuvo buenísimo, me gustó muchísimo.
Sí.
Lo agradezco mucho, lo agradezco. Y también, bueno, fue con la madre, ni hablar.
Y el caso de la mujer penúltima o antepenúltima que ha salido a la palestra es muy parecido también al de la aprobación.
Claro, totalmente. Tú no eres alguien digna de amor a los ojos de mamá, o sea, claramente.
Se nos pasan las vidas enteritas así, años y años, es increíble.
Claro, sí. Y en este falso amor que veíamos en el fragmento anterior, en el video anterior, claro, de tomar eso como amor, que en un momento dijo Jesús a la del Padre, Él no te va a poder amar hasta que no asuma la responsabilidad por sus propias emociones. Claro, indefectiblemente no es amor lo que me unió a mamá, ni también recíprocamente, digamos. Entonces,
claro, fíjate, y la cadena se ha visto muy bien representada, porque ella no se responsabiliza de sus emociones y por lo tanto, de niña pequeña, ya está responsabilizándote de las de papá y de las de mamá, igual yo. Nos responsabilizamos de esas. Entonces, una confusión ya brutal. Eso ya es una actitud de no amor de su parte al no responsabilizarse ellos, pero ellos no lo saben, ¿qué es eso? Por ley, no saben que la ley funciona así. Entonces ya, fíjate la rueda en que se mete toda la vida a uno, de desconocimiento total y de confusión lógica, claro, del amor, ya parte de la base donde un niño pequeño es un alma súper plena, poderosa, vacía, digamos, por individualizarse, está súper perdida, ¿no? ¿Cómo lo sientes eso? Es increíble.
Sí, totalmente. O sea, es como abierto a sentirlo todo e inclusive a asumirlo todo y después a recibirlo todo y por lo tanto recibe el equipaje completo también. Y esta cuestión de poder en ese intento de asumir la responsabilidad, no caer de nuevo en la fachada de querer salvar a todo, como esta chica, también como que va por el otro lado. O sea, va por primera vez a asumir mi responsabilidad, por primera vez yo ponerme al frente, entre comillas, de lo que siento y atravesarlo, muy distinto a la lógica de, bueno, ahora sí, a pagar por todos los daños, un poco lo que Jen sentía, que vimos en el tramo anterior. Claro. Sí, porque se tiende como, un poco como los esclavos, ¿no? A algo tan simple de asumir lo que estás sintiendo en este momento que estás sintiendo, que en este caso era injusto la situación y sí, en eso. Hasta enojarnos con Dios inclusive, de no entender el diseño, de por qué lo hizo así, pero como sentir lo que estamos sintiendo.
Sí, pero yo quería que lo miraras ahí, cómo se va generando la cosa, eso es como muy importante verla, sentir cómo ha ido todo una rueda desde el inicio infantil ese, ¿no? De insistir mucho en eso, porque tenemos mucha vida de eso, de buscar aprobación, y eso parte de un nivel mucho más allá de las palabras, que fue el responsabilizarnos de, ay, mi madre siente pena, yo soy responsable, o mi padre, o no sé qué, o sienten frustración por no poder hacer lo que quieren, porque la gente, claro, somos padres muy jóvenes, no sabemos lo que pasa y no sabemos que la vida realmente física no hay ni por qué morir siquiera. Entonces está todo eso, entonces la frustración es culpa de los niños y eso es como un pecado ya normalizado. O sea, los niños sobran por todos los lados, quieren meterlos en algún lado y son culpables de la frustración que sienten. Claro, todos los...
Claramente.
Frustración de objetivos, de una boca que alimentar, cuando encima hay un terror enorme a siquiera poderse alimentar uno.
Claro.
Y eso siglo tras siglo tras siglo. Bueno, entonces tú allí y ya tienes que salir echando leches, a hacer cosas, ¿no?
No todavía, son las 14, acá es la siesta en el casi trópico, en lo subtropical, y la verdad es que no se transita, o sea, todos se meten en su casa, los que tienen aire se encierran un rato y después salen. La tarde, nuestra tarde, sería dentro de 2 horas más o menos. Pero si era hacer un corte para, como sabía que la mañana iba a estar cargada, iba a hacer algunas cosas antes de salir. Que la tarde sí.
Sí, yo también estoy... Aquí son las 6:30 de la tarde, allí 4 horas menos, en invierno solo 4 de diferencia con Argentina, con México un mogollón más de diferencia, que ya lo hemos visto otra vez, es rarísimo. Y bueno, yo no sé ni cómo he sobrevivido, porque estoy aquí con la pantalla. Pero sí. Y sobre todo es que cada caso es como que... bueno, y muy importante ese caso donde las emociones de los otros nos hacen resonar, pero si no están los otros, un ídolo como Jen, porque todo lo que sea menos nosotros, vale, ellos la sienten, me doy el permiso.
Eso también anoté. Claro, qué claro estuvo eso.
Súper importante.
Cómo delata esa posición de nuestra valía, claro, viniendo de afuera.
Tenemos mucho nosotros ahí, pues que por eso vemos, los vídeos los vemos en parte por eso, que es decir, que la manera de conectar a veces con algo emocional es por eso, ¿no?
Sí, lo tomé así como una práctica sistemática por eso. Y he notado lo que nutre, porque la inercia es muy grande. Es más, tengo unas ganas de empapelar esta pieza en la que vivo, porque esos recordatorios súper importantes, a veces en 3 palabras, pero que te ayudan realmente, que te ayudan a volver al eje, a recuperar todo este tiempo de reprogramación, de descubrimiento, porque no es que hay que reprogramar, no hay que programar nada, está todo esto.
Pero esto tan problemático de necesitar, como necesitaba esta mujer, que otros sintieran para ella darse permiso para sentir los bloqueos, ¿no? Que esto es un problemón enorme, de ahí sienten que es superior. Creo que vimos una parte que se oye muy mal y no está la transcripción, creo que es del 2008, la entrevista a Cornelio, y que hice una pequeña parte, no sé si en audio incluso, y que se entiende pues muy... Y claro,
¿es la que relatan los últimos momentos de Jesús?
Sí, aquella que salía un cacho, no sé cómo lo hice al final. Y ahí se entiende el acento que tiene muy cerrado, pero que además... Pero eso del sentimiento de superioridad, o sea, yo no lo valgo, yo no me permito sentir, también hay arrogancia muchas veces ahí, ¿no? Es una falsa inferioridad. Bueno, hay mucha tela que cortar. Es que en cada uno de los casos que ha habido hay mucho para nosotros, ponernos a procesar de todo. Bueno, sí. Bueno, pues despídete si quieres ya con algún comentario último y un saludo a tus fans.
Bueno, gracias. Hoy fue maratónico. Y bueno, ponemos al servicio esto, así como estamos diciendo nosotros, desde la humildad de proponer algo, acercar algo, a ver qué toque el alma se siente. Va a resonar, seguro.
Sí,
Así
no,
funciona.
bueno, pues gracias y hasta el siguiente. Cerramos.